and Speed comes in having just like hacked their database by wearing the Speed suit. So she's like, I was able to try 1,000 codes in a minute because I was wearing the suit. But I'm really hurting because like I'm really drained from wearing the suit for so long.
I can almost guarantee that the password was Superman.
Yeah.
No, the password was Martha.
Oh, God.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Men of Steel podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Jmike Recaps.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show.
Welcome back to the show. We are resurrecting a theme that we have been running with for the last couple weeks now. Resurrecting is the wrong term because it's just still alive. It's just still going. I don't know. I was trying to make this work for what we're talking about here, because today we are continuing our conversation about the Legends of Dead Earth, and specifically we're talking about the 1996 Superman annual, which is subtitled "The League of Supermen." And to have a conversation about the League of Supermen, we're joined by Sly.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad to be here talking about Supermen, plural, with these lovely folks.
Yeah. Sly, thanks so much for coming on. You've been on another pass, but why don't you tell the folks at home where people can find you and what you're from?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sly. You can find me most places at SlyClone or SlyClone MC. Depending on the platform. I don't know. I gave up on brand consistency. It's fine. But you can find me on our YouTube channel, Point in Progress. I host a podcast called DC Graduates, where we go through all the animated DC films. And we've got a lot of other things cooking in the pipeline. So excited to get back to throwing all my creative energy into that.
Yeah, it's a totally fun channel. I've been on talking about either the death or the return. I forget which because I watch both for the purpose of our conversation.
I think it's return. I don't know. I have a spreadsheet somewhere. I could tell you.
I think it was the return, which is in keeping for the conversation today. But so for our listeners at home, we are continuing our conversation about the Legends of Dead Earth, which was an event from 1996 where all the annuals in DC Comics were set in this whole period far in the future. And so there's these weird perspectives of things. And as a result, it's a bunch of annuals that I think are pretty accessible because they're kind of intended to be like totally standalone one shots. Yep. And so Sly, did you have any idea what I was talking about when I pitched this to you?
No clue. We had just wrapped another recording together, and you were like, hey, I'm working on this project for the podcast. Do you want to read one of these two, annuals? And you pitched them both to me, and I said, sure, I'll read one of them, throw it at me. And that's about all I knew going into it.
All right, perfect. So, Jmike, I think this is time that we do everyone's favorite segment within the show, which is Jmike tries to explain what we're about to talk about.
Badly. You forgot the badly part.
I am not trying to say badly. Awkwardly, maybe. I don't think I've ever said badly about you.
I'm saying badly. But anyway, far off in the distant future, I think we said it was like 3,200 years from now at one point. Far away from the distant future, Earth is dead. In this particular issue, they said robotic beings had captured the essence of Superman and traveled with it with the humans who left Earth to another planet. And they had basically genetically altered a few people with the essence of Superman. But there's a gimmick. Everyone has one power of his. Mm-hmm. So I think it starts off with one guy has the heat vision, but the drawback is he has to release the heat that builds up in his body every 15 minutes or so. The next has his flying ability, but he can't really not fly because if he stands still too long, he'll float off into space. The next guy has his X-ray vision, which works when he's on a mission, but after the mission's over, he's kind of blind. So he has to wear like lead-lined glasses. Another guy has his invulnerability, but like he can't feel anything. And the other guy has the superhuman strength, but he can't hold anything without crushing it. And so they're basically the beginner version of the League of Supermen. And as the story progresses, two recruits come along, and the girl has super speed, but she has to wear a suit for it. And I forget what her drawback
breath.
is. Oh, the drawback for the speed. I don't remember the drawback for the speed. Yeah,
well, because they're artificial, they don't have the same drawbacks the way what you're referring to is that the members of the League of Supermen each are infused with the DNA of Superman, but because they're humans, their human body can only tolerate one superpower. And the ones who get these modifications have like some sort of weird drawback depending on which type that you've referred to. The two recruits haven't had the genetic modification yet, so they're wearing artificial suits to simulate superpowers. And so like the speedster, like, yes, she'll get really tired after a while. Like that's a point that they make. There are drawbacks, but the drawbacks aren't the same as being like,
the other ones,
as the built-in powers. Yeah. So yeah, it's a speedster. And then the other one, which you can describe.
The other guy. Yeah.
Oh, the
anyway,
super breath
sorry,
guy.
continue.
Super breath.
Yes, the super breath. But like, so they incorporate them into the group. They come to find out there's a plot against them. After also forgot to mention, actually, the AI version of Superman is there with them. He's basically a hologram who gives them orders and tells them stuff to do and how to go about doing things. He comes up with this bright idea for this super weapon he made called the Gauntlet, which is basically like this plasma web that surrounds the Earth to prevent it from outer space attacks. But they notice that he's kind of like not all there most of the time. He's kind of very cold and calculated with his interactions with them after a point. And they come out. They are warned about an attack on the Gauntlet exterior locations on Earth, or on that Earth, where like the geothermal processing plant is under attack, or this bomb or something's going to happen to it. And while they're solving all the problems with it, they come to find out that Superman himself had ordered the attack or on it. And so they sit down and think, they're like, this can't be Superman. Superman would never do this. And they're like, well, this is very out of character. So they question him about it, and he's like, back on Earth, we had a saying where, in order to make an omelet, you had to crack a few eggs. Ha 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 ha. And they're like, oh, this is very un-Superman-ish. Something's wrong. So they decide to shut him down for the good of everybody. And he sets them up with different trials to get through. Most of them make it through. Some of them sacrifice themselves in order to let everyone else go through. And by the time they make it to Superman, he's like, oh, surprise, you did it. And I want to thank you for shutting me down, because I noticed that I was starting to lose my humanity and I couldn't have that. And there's nothing more important than being human than humanity. So he basically tells them that he wasn't allowed to shut himself down. So he had to figure out a way to have them shut him down for him. And he was like, there wasn't any real danger with the atrocities that were happening. I had calculated it so like everyone would be safe anyway. And the big gauntlet thing was basically a weather satellite system that I put into orbit. But I wanted you guys to realize that what you're doing is very important to the survival of humanity. And with that, he kind of like fades off into the ether. And they afterwards have a big press conference where they're like, Superman sacrificed everything to make sure everyone will be okay. And from now on, we're going to live up to that legacy. And there will be no more artificial Superman. We're going to use our natural abilities to save everyone.
Reverse that.
Huh?
Reverse that. It's not that they're no more artificial. It's that they're no longer going to infuse humans with superpowers. So they're going to use artificial methods to replicate superpowers going forward.
It was the same thing. It was close.
I know. I'm just the wording was reversed.
Pedantic.
Semantics.
Is it pedantry when we're talking about the opposite point?
I don't know. We're having a great time.
It's all good. No, you got it. Like, again, these are one-shot annuals, so it's, the story is pretty concise. Yeah, like this is a really eye-catching concept of a story. Like I saw this cover and I was like, fuck, I have to buy this book because it was really cool just to see a bunch of Supermen with like cool powers in a weird mixed group doing all kinds of cool stuff. So yeah, Jmike, you got the story. That's exactly right.
Yes, I did the thing.
You did the thing. Yeah, so let's talk about this issue here. You know, before we get too far in, I want to talk about the cover, and then I want to talk about the credits page of this book. We have had this conversation about annuals recently because we've been talking about annuals, and one of the things about annuals from either publisher, but especially DC in this time, is that there's two ways for it to go. Either it's the cream of the crop doing a story that they just want to tell and that they don't normally get a chance to, or it is a weird mix of people. And when you look at the cover and the credits page, there are so many pencilers and so many inkers on this team. Yeah. And I like it's a lot of names. And then the only name that I really recognize is Jerry Ordway, who did the cover. Mm-hmm. Which I want to call out. He also did the Adventures of Superman cover. And I think maybe he might have done a bunch of these covers because he also, I think, did the Man of Steel cover.
Are we detecting consistency?
Maybe. Now that I'm saying that, I'm now wondering if he did all of them.
Because like some of these annual issues we've gone through have been, there's a whole spectrum of hey, this is pretty interesting to, hey, that's very out there.
Okay, he did the Action Comics one too, which we haven't talked about yet. So yeah, he actually did all the Superman covers.
Nice.
I doubt he did Superboy and Supergirl, but it doesn't look like it. But at least for the actual Superman books, because there were 4 of them at the time, he did all the covers. So that's a pretty cool detail right there, and speaks to like Jerry Ordway is an amazing penciler. We haven't talked about him a lot, even though he was the main penciler for a good chunk of the Triangle era on Superman. But we have talked about him when we talked about the power of Shazam, Jmike. If you remember when we talked about Power of Shazam Volume 1 with JD, like he was the writer and artist on that entire series.
Oh, okay.
And particularly that watercolored first like graphic novel like story that happened in there, the actual origin story for Shazam or for Captain Marvel in that, he did all of that. He did the watercoloring for that too. So just a fantastic artist. I love his work, and you can see just how a master of his craft he is when you look at this cover, because it's so striking with this team here.
I really like the play of shadows in the cover. I think it creates such a striking, like, I can see why you walked by this and picked it up because it's so intriguing. You see all the Supermen, you see them with exhibiting their one power, and the bomb generator thing immediately catching your eye, and the sense of like what is going on here, what's the urgency, like you want to pick it up and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, it just does a great job of like hinting at like the twist of the book, you know, like because when you first look at it, if you don't know that it's like they're each restricted to one power, it's like here's a bunch of guys dressed up as Superman, like because they're wearing the full Superman costume. There's no like modification or anything to it, but it shows off each of their powers so well. And you know, once you know the context, you're like, this is like just incredible economy of storytelling. You know, it's such like here's the team in one shot, and you can tell what they all do, and it's really cool. But then we get into the actual book, and I think that our team is doing fine with this book. Like there's no spot where I'm like, this is, you know, atrociously bad. Like there's some spot where this doesn't feel like the A Team, but it's definitely you know it's definitely a mixed bag of art. Like none that I would like I say is bad, but it's inconsistent, and because there's multiple people involved, and there's just like you know, weird proportions and stuff like that going on, and it's just interesting going into this one because I think the premise is the strongest part about this issue, and then the execution is truncated by virtue of the fact that it's an annual. Rereading this one, I was like very frustrated that it was one issue.
Really?
Well, because it's such a like I will talk about the beats. Like I just kept on thinking like, man, they cover so much ground so quickly in this thing, when this idea of a team where everyone has one power could breathe. And frankly, this idea was allowed to breathe, because there's a comic that has this exact premise that came out like 10 years later, which is Dynamo 5, where a Superman analog goes around and has sex with a lot of women and then has a bunch of bastards. And then when he dies, all of their kids, or all of his kids, like come out of hiding to take up the role, and each one has one superpower.
That's interesting.
And the team Dynamo 5 is each one has one power of Captain Dynamo. And so and that was a pretty cool book. Also a cool book, however, that was a stronger premise than its execution. Because I think like the idea of just like a team where everyone has one superpower of Superman is such a cool fucking premise.
Yeah, for sure. What plot points would you have liked to see them explore more if they had more time with them?
I mean, the big thing is just like the downfall of Superman.
Okay, yeah.
Like I would have rather spent more time in like with them sort of like coming to the realization that Superman is going crazy. But let's talk about the beats. Let's talk about the beats and see if that really needs that breathing room, or if it just works fine as it is, as this one little like self-contained kind of story. Yeah, so we open the story and there's a little bit of a not prologue, there like a little bit of a exposition dump saying that like this is one of the many worlds that have gone off since Earth has fallen. It's a utopia, except every now and then in this paradise there are snakes, and we see an explosion, and then we get another good shot, like a full page spread of the League of Supermen in action, and like the cover, we get each one of them using their one power really well, and sort of, you know, they're all like shouting out each other's code names and making sure that we have like a good sense of like, here's all the deal with the team. Like Heat, that was a good call. That's right, Pounder. Shield, get over there. You know, like all this stuff. Yeah. Like it's very Jim Shooter with like the like, yeah, you have to like say everyone's code name. Like you can't. You have to do that. It's
so people can reference it moving forward. You're like, oh yeah, that's Flyboy, obviously.
Right. But yeah, so they're investigating like a terrorist operation. There's robots, there's a bomb, there's traps and everything. And you know, we get to see each of them doing like cool stuff with their powers. We get to see through, you know, seeing all the depth charges that are activated by the motion. We get Pounder grabbing the roof. This is one of the spots where like, yes, he's the super strong guy, but also he is so fucking big when he holds up that when he's holding up that roof, that it's where the art is like, man, this is the 90s.
Hell yeah, it is. I will say I know this is a Superman podcast and I'm gonna go off on a tangent that's not related to the Superman aspect of this book, but I thought the narrative premise was so interesting. Of, you know, Earth is dead, we killed it, we've gone off, we found another planet, we've reinvented what we think society is, and part of that is, you know, this hologram of Superman and the drone bots that carried him with us. I recently just finished the Wayfarer series by Becky Chambers, which includes basically the same idea. Humans killed the planet. They went off in a spaceship to find something else, and then developed like a culture and community around living on that. And I think exploring that theme of like, what does society look like when we're the ones who get to kind of build it from the ground up, and to tell that story revolving around the mythos of the ideals of Superman, you know, truth, justice, better tomorrow. What does that actually mean? So far removed from Superman actually being a person anybody knows. I think that's just such a fascinating premise, and I really enjoyed getting to like live in that world and see how it plays out.
For real, you know who would do an amazing job with this book? Like, not that this is a bad issue. It's just it's one issue doing it. Like, can you imagine Grant Morrison being given this plot? Like a society built around Superman. Like, Jesus, they would have like so much fun with this whole premise.
Please don't give him any more ideas.
So anyway, there is a bomb that they have to identify and then take out. They send Shield, who is their invulnerable member, to do the soldier jumping on the grenade situation.
The Captain America move, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. And so he suppresses it, and everyone's like, "Nice work, Shield. You okay?" Didn't feel a thing. I never do. And then we see them like climbing up out of this whole situation, and there's like a handler team that arrives on the scene, and this is where we get the first like bit about like the issues. Like the "I never do" part is honestly like the first line where you're like, oh, this kind of sucks having superpowers.
It's setting up like, what does it mean to have super abilities, and to have all of these characters functionally be disabled and move throughout the world as disabled individuals while also being super highly powered in one specific skill set is something they don't interrogate, but they could have. But
Right, exactly.
it's the 90s.
Exactly. This is such a cool fucking idea. like this issue stuck with me so hard because it was such a like the idea of the guy who is super strong can't not crush anything to the point that he has to be hand fed like a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that is so fucking cool. Like superpowers as a disability is just like this amazing idea. And I really adore how this issue like approaches it. You know, we get see-through like freaking out and honestly yelling at the support crew. Like they're like, you know, they take offense at how like they say no need to get so abusive, but like see through everything he looks at is just he's looking through, he's seeing lines, he's seeing the outlines of things and then like their internals. And so they have to put lead glasses on him so he's blind if he's not in mission mode. And Pounder, when he's like, leave the poor guy alone, he like accidentally breaks the thing because he's so strong. They have to just like sit him down and like feed him a water bottle and like, and they're on their way back to this like big Superman facility. But like we're starting to get the vibe that they all need the support personnel. Like the League has a team, and like
Flyboy has to literally be like held down so he doesn't just float off. Like that panel in particular, I was like, oh wow, like the art at least is really getting into this.
Yeah. So they go back to their base of operations, and it is a Superman adorned building. Like this is the infrastructure. Like they are a big part of the running of the system. Like Superman is deeply integrated into the society as a whole. It's not just like some sort of like outside force. And right when they get back, it's like, by the way, here are the rookies.
Here's the FNGs. Have fun. Training mission. Let's go.
I find their jackets incredible. I really wish those training uniforms are great. Cool. I love those.
That would make a killer, like, obscure cosplayer Halloween costume or something.
Oh God, can you imagine like just a bunch of Superman cosplayers just getting together, but secretly being the League of Supermen because they wanted to be?
That'd be awesome.
So their code names don't get dropped until the end of the book, but it's Speed and Tempest. Is their code names.
Tempest is the coolest fucking shit name.
It's a good fucking name. You know what? He actually makes Super Breath like be like, wouldn't be that bad a power actually, even though it's like consistently considered like the dumbest superpower.
And if he breathes too hard, his legs collapse.
Yeah. Well, yes. Can you imagine what the actual drawback would be if he had the power though? As opposed to just like the machine, like just like, oh, it's too strong.
Breathing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a freaking iron lung machine or something.
Probably, yeah. Or like an oxygen tube or something like,
yeah.
Like something like fed into his nose so that he can breathe out. Like he can't breathe with his mouth and all or something like that. Yeah. I mean, we can imagine the speed ones. There's a billion drawbacks to super speed, like just aging too fast, the friction or anything like that. Yeah.
Have you all played Dispatch?
Yep. I was just about to say that.
I have not. So
just really live with that. Shout out to my favorite podcaster, Mayana Barron, got writing credits and voiced one of the roles in that. It was very fun.
Yeah, I know. I've heard I need to play it.
It's really good.
You have an excuse.
Yeah, it's true. I just had a child. At the point when this episode is dropping, it's going to be a little bit of time. But when this episode is recording, I am 3 weeks into being dad times 2. So that's all fun.
Give yourself some time to, like, in a moment of silence, go do your thing and play Dispatch, and then come back and like, oh, I get it.
But so the new recruits are introduced to Heat, who is the leader of the team, we learn. And he's like, excuse me for a moment. And he opens up a window and just shoots a beam of heat outside. Which, he reveals that he absorbs solar radiation just like Superman and expresses it as heat beams. But unlike Superman, he has nothing that can like store that energy particularly well. It doesn't, like, he just keeps on absorbing energy. And if he doesn't vent every 15 minutes or so, he'd burn up from the inside, which I, in my head, rewrote to be 2 hours for some reason. Because that made more sense to me in life, because I can't imagine, he says that he can't get through a night's sleep because of his powers. Yeah. And I can't actually imagine a person surviving only being able to go 15 minutes.
You can't, is the answer.
Right.
But when your internal organs start to heat up, I think you're going to wake up and shoot a beam out the window every 15 minutes.
Right. So this is one of those parts where I'm like, man, every fucking 15 minutes, you're the leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wonder if he has those Cyclops glasses.
Well, no, that's the thing. Like, he has to shoot out the heat beams. Even if he had a thing to do it, he'd have to actually like actively do so. He doesn't sleep. That's his that's his drawback. The heat, the having the vent part is just like the catalyst. The real thing is that he is sleep deprived like crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
These powers suck.
He has newborn situation.
Exactly.
And maybe that's why the 2 hours came to me, because like it's a 2 hour cycle for feeding.
Yeah.
But he's in a newborn situation.
2 hours would be reasonable. That would be livable. But if you want to really sink into the horrors of what it means to be a superpowered individual, an artificially like DNA grafted superpowered individual, it's kind of horrific. And I love that. Yeah,
so then we get a nice page where each panel is each other member of the team, the core 5, and we see each of their drawbacks. So like we said, see-through, everything he sees is just outlines and skeletons. Flyboy, if he is not consciously moving in a direction, will just float wherever. Pounder is so strong that he crushes everything, and so he has to be hand-fed like a baby. And then Shield, this is the obvious one for an invulnerable person, can't feel shit. Mm-hmm. They do make the point, though, that he has to be led around like an old man because he might damage stuff just by bumping into it. I imagine that even with that, he still has more autonomy than like Pounder does, frankly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But like the invulnerable to the point where you can't feel anything thing is a pretty common trope for that specific superpower.
Yeah.
But then the recruits are led into the room where they get to meet the boss. And Jmike, as you mentioned, we get the hologram of Superman. And I like this for a few reasons. I like that it's like the hologram of Jor-El.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That Superman has become his father in this particular aspect. I like that this is tied into, like, these annuals came out only 2 years after the death and return cycle of Superman. So like they are leaning in hard to the whole like doomsday story. Like they recount Superman's adventures at one point, and it's like, yeah, he died and he came back, and we have his essence on file now and all this shit. So they're really leaning into that. It's mullet Superman for that fact, just to point out that exactly when this story happened. It's in that little narrow window of time. But we get this like enthusiastic Superman who's like, yeah, it's great having new members, especially in the time of the Gauntlet, because we're creating space lasers.
I do love how in this whole scene where you're getting to meet the holographic Superman, they're kind of seeding what he's powered by all the like green imagery in the background, all the green technology and all the green. And
that's a good call. I hadn't thought about that.
I wonder what's powering this hologram.
That's a really good call. Like the text bubbles are all green, all the screens are green. I hadn't caught that. That's a fantastic detail. Thank you for calling attention to that.
Hell yeah. My comms degree paid off in one specific instance.
But so everyone's like, hey, this whole gauntlet thing sounds pretty weird, right? And then like Heat's like, it's Superman. He's got a good reason. It's fine.
We're just blindly trusting him. It's Superman. He can do no wrong. He's perfect.
I mean, that's, like that's the challenge right there. And he's like, now let's go so I can find a window. Otherwise I might embarrass myself. And they leave and they're like, there's something that they don't catch about the computer generated light, something cold. Laying it on thick for the audience there.
Oh yeah.
Then they put on Meta Ray-Bans or not Meta Ray-Bans, Meta Quests so that they can just watch VR displays of everything. And we get a history dump of all the info, which all of these books do. And like, again, this was like super recent. So maybe it's just a primer for anyone who's like not caught up on Superman at this point. But we get a lot of info about the Superman dying at Doomsday's hand and then being resurrected. And then it jumps to, and when Earth died, by the way, we had his computer files on hand. So this particular world was able to fashion the League of Supermen. And I think this is a really cool idea. Like the human volunteers each being able to be given one superpower is really cool. I find that the prototype team that they show that have, it's hard to really identify. Only one's flying, so that one's like a flyer. But then we've got one who's like half steel, and then like one that looks like it's a cat person. Like I don't know what all their powers are, but it's a cool look, and it's fun from a design standpoint just to be like, here's some variations on the Superman costume. Like I'm always here for variations. They don't always work, but like I'm always here to see them.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed the like original 5 or whatever, really getting to see who they are and trying to guess what powers they might have had. And I would love a spin-off of these 5. Tell me more about them.
Yeah. Tempest continues to ask like, hey, this whole like laser guns in space thing, like this seems weird. And it's just like, it's a little weird. Yeah, but it's Superman. He's been different recently, but it's fine. He's Superman.
Fine. Everything's fine.
There's never been an evil Superman before. Who would do something like that?
Right. So we pick up an hour later, and I like the little detail that Heat like fires off a heat beam at the start of the story.
Yeah.
And they check in with the rookies. And so Speed has been equipped with a suit that will like super accentuate her like muscle reactions to things to simulate super speed. And she's got a glucose feed. And I thought that was a really cool detail. So they just here's a backpack full of sugar that's just going to keep you going.
Yeah. I mean, they're like sending electronic signals into her muscles to like stimulate her muscles. Like you need some sort of energy, but it's just like sugar backpack.
Yeah, sugar backpack. Meanwhile, Tempest, it has simulated super breath by way of like a collar that like it augments the pressure of the air that he's blowing out. But the downside is if he inhales, it works both ways. So he has to like control his breath and like really try to breathe through his nose. Otherwise he'll like collapse his lungs.
Yeah, it sucks.
But in terms of downsides, like that's pretty fucking minor. Like that, like this is
that's not waking up every 15 minutes so you don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it only works if he has a suit on too, right? So if he doesn't have a suit on.
For the reckies, yeah.
Right. But like they make super breath actually like work pretty well. And like this is an era. So this is 90s Superman, which is coming off of the tail end of the Man of Steel John Byrne relaunch. And they kind of got rid of the chill portion of the super breath. They just made it like you can blow really hard and push stuff, but they got rid of the whole like it freezes things part, which is really just like a kid's understanding of like how physics work. Like you blow on soup and all of a sudden it's cold, and that's why Superman blows on stuff and it becomes really cold. And they've tried to like explain how it works beyond just that component. Honestly, just being able to blow shit really fucking hard and like push like big metal thick like machines out of the way because he's so goddamn strong with his breath is a really cool power.
Yeah, the way he like manipulates the environment in multiple situations, the way like the breath interacts with the world around him really does make a compelling case for why this is actually a viable superpower.
Yeah, this is very similar to a thing I have said a lot about Ultra Boy from the Legion of Superheroes, who his deal is that he has all of the powers of Superman, but can only use one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
I have
Yeah.
said, like, this is such a cool character. The fact that he has never been like the star of his own book outside of like random miniseries that are like, you know, 2 Legion of Superheroes. Like, it's such a cool suite of abilities that, like, why don't we just like focus? Like, every power of Superman's so cool. Like, I mean, just we're not that far removed from like the founding 5 X-Men when we get down to it. You know, like Cyclops is the energy blast, like Iceman's the freeze breath, Angel's the flight. You know, like we're talking about. You could argue Beast is the super strength in that scenario. Like the breakdown of those powers and really exploring what those powers do is a really interesting and cool aspect of superhero fiction. You know, like. I always say that the Flash is like a subset of Superman because like fundamentally the power is so invincible that you might as like that's the real story. And like, how can we do cool things with super speed? Like, I love that the Flash is, we're going to take one of Superman's powers and we're going to draw out as many sort of like physics-based solutions that you can do with this one superpower. And I think that this is such a cool exploration of it where you're like, and again, this is just the fact that it's one issue. I wish we could spend more time with this. Mm-hmm. Like these powers are so cool by themselves and they get overlooked because they're normally part of Superman's suite of abilities. And they lose sight of those powers or those individual powers in favor of he can do all these things. And some of them are bigger ticket items that are never really in a bad thing to have. You know, he doesn't have the downsides of like Pounder, for example, with his super strength.
Yeah, it's so interesting to take one power and really interrogate like what are the tertiary implications of what you can do with this? How does that interact with the world around us? Like you were saying, like how does physics interact with super speed and like lightning power and all that stuff? It's a really interesting way to explore a trope of the genre of superhero media. And yeah, this is so cool, and you've won me over to wanting more of this.
Right.
Somebody give us the full series.
Yeah, it's very cool stuff to like really explore like what a person who has to spend their time thinking about that one power as opposed to Superman being like, well, I can do all this shit is really cool. Immediately there's another like thing. They're like, all right, kids, school's over. Let's see what you can do in the real world. And there's a power station issue that they're supposed to check out. What is this whole situation?
The training mission for, you know.
Yeah, it starts off as a training mission, but then it turns real as this like power facility fires up and it causes this like seismic activity.
It starts booting up on its own and like affecting the seismology around, and like earthquakes or volcanoes are going off and there's a tsunami or whatever.
We have Superman be shown to activate it, which is just for us, the audience, to be like completely on this, like to be on the side of like, yeah, Superman's gone crazy when it actually happens. Like they just make it explicit. Like, yeah, Superman's doing the shit. And he activates this thing and it causes a like seismic activity and it causes a tidal wave. And Flyboy takes out Tempest and Tempest disperses the tidal wave with his super breath. And that's really cool. And then Pounder jumps in and like moves shit into position to like protect everything, and Speed builds up a barrier super fast using her super speed. It's all really cool uses of their individual powers. Like it's just like I think they're like, it's like the Legion of Superheroes where like each member is supposed to have one superpower. Like it's kind of fun just being like, you've got one power, like what can you do with that one power? And like you said, interrogate and really like explore it all.
Yeah, when you have the chance to pare down into a single ability instead of having, you know, the world's greatest hero who can do it all, you have to really think about how can they interact with the team, how can they work together, and what else could you do with this power that you wouldn't normally see. Like you said, Speed's literally like hand by hand carrying these rocks to build up a barrier, and the way they did her text box through that and the like remnants of her on that panel is just so cool.
Yeah. As she's running, there's like the whole sentence takes up the whole bottom portion of the page, but it's just like one bubble is no, second bubble is sooner, said, then, done. And like you see her like after images all over the place doing this. It's really cool. I like her speed suit, by the way. Like, I think it's a really cool exoskeleton design from a comic book. Do you guys remember the show Mantis?
Mantis.
It was with, what's his face? The actor who was the voice actor for John Jones in JLU.
Oh, I fucking love that guy. I can never remember his name.
Carl Lumbly is the actor. But so it has a very similar design to the exoskeleton that he wore in that. Mantis, the premise was it's a scientist who was paralyzed, who developed an exoskeleton that allowed him to walk and gave him superpowers, and so he became a superhero. But the design is very similar to Mantis, where it's like this like wetsuit kind of thing with then like accoutrement like kind of like bolted all over to sort of be where your musculature and so forth is. And I like it. It looks like a suit that is designed to augment a person in some way, and isn't just like here's robot arms.
Yeah, it definitely looks really cool, and the way you could see the like nodes of the like suit's electrons or whatever firing into the muscles, and you see that whole like web of like fake nerves or whatever is really cool.
Yeah. So the rest of the team shuts down this whole thing, and it's like, all right, we got the situation in hand, everything's under control. And he's like, no, not everything. And they go and they confront Superman about it, and he's like, hey, you turned this on preemptively, like or prematurely, like this caused a tidal wave and also a lava flow. This would have been a problem. And he's like, we can't tolerate delays. The Gauntlet project is vital, but the danger to civilians. There was a popular saying on old Earth, Mr. Fontaine. Perhaps you should consider its application in this instance. If you want to make an omelet, you have to break some eggs, as we had pointed out before. And that's supposed to be this like really ominous line. And this is just the spot where I'm like, this is moving very quickly, because we're exactly 26 pages in. The next scene, they're all in civilian clothes hanging out, and Speed comes in having just like hacked their database by wearing the speed suit. So she's like, I was able to try 1,000 codes in a minute because I was wearing the suit. But I'm really hurting because like I'm really drained from wearing the suit for so long.
I can almost guarantee that the password was Superman.
Yeah.
No, the password was Martha.
Oh God. But yeah, no, we have like firmly entered Act 2. Like, this is the problem. Here's how we're dealing with it. What are we gonna do? Is Superman fallible? Like, do we trust this hologram generation of code? Like, can we believe in him the way we've believed in Superman, the reason we're here? Like, they've all committed to this cause and given up their body and, you know, they're basically their livelihood for this ideal of Superman. And now they're confronted with the question of like, is this like code, is this hologram fallible? Like, is he right? Is he correct? What can we support this, basically?
Yeah, because Speed comes in and is like, hey, I hacked the system. And here's the thing. The Gauntlet program isn't defending us from outer space. The laser guns are all going to be phasing our planet. So it's all about taking out dissidents. So it's like Project Insight from like Winter Soldier.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Project Insight. That's what I was thinking of.
They get it from here?
Maybe. Are Marcus and McFeely like big fans of obscure Superman annuals from the 90s? Maybe.
I hope so.
That would be a really fun situation. But here's just another thing. It's moving so fast. Like they have this whole conversation being like, can we trust Superman? And like, you know, like the fact that it's a new recruit that like brings the info, like, and they're like, most of them are like, yeah, we can trust them. But S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't. S.H.I.E.L.D. is like, we can't trust Superman. He's wearing do you remember the 90s look for the prankster, the Flash villain?
Yes.
It's like his shirt is basically that look. Like he's wearing that outfit. It's this weird stripy look with like a vest kind of design. But everyone else is immediately on board. And I remember in my head that this was like more of a split between the team. It's really just S.H.I.E.L.D. that they throw him in. And then the rest of the team is like, man, we can't trust Superman. We got to go fucking deal with and again, it's just really fast. Like, because they immediately are like, oh, we got the information that Superman might be kind of a douchebag. Probably should deal with that, as opposed to doing more investigations or anything like that. Which, fair, the circumstances that they're presented with are really urgent and dire. But like it is just, man, this is a breakneck issue.
Yeah, it's escalated quickly.
Yes. So they rush off to go and deal with Superman, and the facility that they're in starts locking them off because they're being observed as invaders. And they're like, we have to get to the rare element that's powering the Superman hologram, which is kryptonite.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. But yeah, they're essentially acting as insurgents, and the building is trying to counteract their measures to get to the core of Superman.
Yeah. So they start going in. See-Through tries to show Pounder where the weakest point in like one of the blast doors that closes on them is, and then he gets blasted with a stun beam. They go into like the substructure of the building where they like get flooded out, and they're losing people. Like Flyboy is lost in this one. Pounder gets knocked out after pounding his way through a door, but taking like, it was like an electrified door, so it's like shocking him this whole time. When they actually get to the hologram of Superman, sonics go up. It's really messing with them. Here's a weird spot, which is that they find the containment structure for the kryptonite that is powering it. And Heat's like, my beams aren't going to be able to burn through it fast enough. And Speed is like, well, what if I rub my hands on it at super speed to create friction? Surely that will be sufficient. And then Tempest blows at it and it like knocks it all. And that makes it open. And so Heat's able to blast it. Here's my thought. Why is Speed's super speed friction more power, like hotter than Heat beams?
That's a great question.
Because comic books, Case.
Because comic books.
I kind of feel like it should be reversed. Heat melts it, and then she should take it away or rip it out or something. But
She might not be strong enough.
it's a team move. Like it's all fine. She's using friction to create heat from super speed. That's a classic super speed power. Like that's all fine. Tempest gets a part of it because he blows on it. It's really, really hot. Now blow on it. It's his thing. And then they melt the kryptonite, which I kind of wish affected the actual League members. Like this would be another spot where like it would be beneficial for the ones who are not genetically modified to have their not genetically modified powers here.
Yeah.
Because like the kryptonite is effectively just a battery here. Like it could have been anything. Like it's kind of nice that it's kryptonite from a lore standpoint, but they don't do anything with it. Like I said, it could just be any power source.
Yeah, I think that like, well, first of all, they didn't have the time to do anything with it, but also like,
Right.
what percentage of their DNA has been fragmented and like encoded with Superman's? Is it enough to have any sort of intolerance to kryptonite? I don't know. Like what does a kryptonite allergy look like when you have such a distilled amount of Kryptonian DNA in your system? That would be a fascinating question to get an answer to. But I'm a nerd.
Yeah, it looks like nothing. Like it looks like
Yeah.
it doesn't do anything to these guys, which is all well and good. But again, it's like it's kind of a Chekhov's gun that doesn't really do much.
Mhm.
Like it never fires. Like the fact that it's kryptonite, not just like some other power source, is like, again, it's fun from a lore standpoint. If I was writing this, I would absolutely use kryptonite as the power source, no matter what.
Yeah,
Like there's
'cause
no
the
scenario
way
where I would.
it's degrading the message of Superman, what it's doing to him as he's losing his touch with humanity and recognizing that about himself makes for an interesting idea. Like this is a Superman that is projected and powered by kryptonite, and it's degrading him and his ideals and what it means to have a connection with humanity, and that makes for an interesting narrative, but we don't really go further than that.
Right. So they destroy the kryptonite. The hologram of Superman says, "Congratulations, you guys figured this out."
You passed my test.
I actually wasn't going crazy, but I was afraid I might. And so I made sure you guys thought I was going crazy before it got too important. And this is fine. Like the idea that they put safeguards in place to prevent Superman from being like infected with a virus or something that would cause him to self-destruct or do anything like that is fine. Like I like this idea that he has to pretend to be crazy before he actually goes crazy. Like I think is a cool take on the story, because it's a pretty classic trope of like the AI goes insane.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But in this case, it's one where the AI is aware that it has the potential to go insane eventually, and is like, well, I better take myself out now before
And it's
we
still
get any
Superman,
further.
so he doesn't want to hurt humanity.
Yeah.
Right. And he reveals that all of the disasters that he was like associated with were actually like, no, like that tidal wave wasn't actually going to hit any coastline. Like I already had figured that out. Like the lava flow was already going to be diverted by the actual like flow of the natural topography. All these things weren't going to happen. And the gauntlet is just a weather control system. It had no lasers actually built into it.
Which is all well and good, and I understand why that is the message of the Superman, but it did lead me to question, how did the League, the Supermen, plural, not recognize that as they were calculating? And I think I just have to, chalk it up to heat of the moment. You see disaster, you solve problem. But if it was like specifically engineered so that the tidal wave would dissolve before it got anywhere close to the coastline, like, would you not recognize that?
The headcanon, if we really want to give a headcanon, is that Superman controls all their data that they were getting. Like he also controlled all the data that the gauntlet was a nefarious thing with lasers.
Right.
So like he could have potentially been like changed the data to be like, this is a dire emergency. It's going to hit the, he could have put out a false beacon just saying this is going to hit.
Yeah.
Even if they like stopped and looked at the actual like trajectory of the tidal wave, they may have seen that it wasn't going to hit, but all he needed to do was like make them think it was. But he gives this whole speech about how he was starting to feel the disassociation, that centuries of being just a hologram has caused him to lose touch with his humanity, and that the most important thing is to have that human touch. And so as he passes away, he gives this sort of like sentiment to them that that being human is the important part of the Superman equation, that it's the man part, not the super, that's important here. Now, why they come to this conclusion, I don't necessarily know. Because like I don't see how them having physical superpowers makes any sort of difference, but they gather the world to mourn the loss of Superman for real this time.
For real this time.
Yeah.
For realsies.
Superman Funeral Part 3.
Right. And he gives this whole speech about Superman and so forth, which everyone is very trusting of the League of Supermen, where they're like, yeah, we just killed your messiah that like our entire society is built around, because we say that he wanted it this way.
Right. Yeah. Just trust me, bro. This is actually what he wanted.
But they say they rededicate themselves to the spirit of Superman, and with that, they're going to stop infusing superpowers into people, and they're just going to keep using the artificial ones. And that, I don't necessarily disagree with the sentiment, but I do think that this isn't the story that teaches them that lesson.
No.
Right. Like, you could interrogate like the eugenics of it all and like the DNA altering and what that means for the course of humanity or whatever. We don't have time to do that in a 40-page issue. But like that is something that they could have interrogated and be like, okay, what is this actually doing to us? Is the disabling experience of holding these powers worth the honor of being this superheroed superpowered being. Like, what does that mean for the future of humanity? At what point does everybody have an aspect of Superman's powers? And that's just how they exist as a society. This is not the book where they would interrogate that.
No.
So they're just going, yay, humanity! We're gonna do the thing the way you want it.
Yeah, and like looking at it, like looking back, one, having the kryptonite actually affect them would be a big start to that whole story. Like if the kryptonite was preventing them from actually like doing the thing and it was only the people with artificial powers that were able to do, that would be a good start right there. But two, if there were more that felt that they had given up so much for Superman that they couldn't turn their back on him.
Mhm.
Like if the schism between them wasn't just Shield saying like, yeah, I believe in Superman, everyone else doesn't. Fuck you guys.
Right.
If it had been like most of the group and like maybe just Heat or something like that like stood against Superman or something to that degree, maybe that would be more of a lesson to it all. Like where the fact that they were these isolated entities that had handlers and all that, could have spoke to how how they had lost touch with society by virtue of being these like celebrities that it makes me think of like the whole like celebrity rule, which is like whenever someone becomes famous they like stop progressing in terms of their ability to understand technology.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that's why like Eminem has just like a shitload of like DVD porn because like the internet doesn't really exist for him. Like it's just one of those things where like, yeah, you could have had a few people be like, I don't understand what it's like to be human anymore because I have superpowers. And like
or even just this delirium of, I've committed myself to this cause. I've given up all of my independence. I have to rely so heavily on these handlers and these people around me. This is my mission. This is my goal. Like, how can I betray my core like directive of like, I am a Superman and this is what I do and this is the man I will blindly follow no matter what. Like, we don't stop to consider like how they actually feel about losing their messiah, about losing this guiding force that's shaped the biggest decision of their lives that they've given up literally everything for.
Yeah, exactly. Like like this is like every one of these like Legends of Dead Earth stories that we've talked about have been like so much story crammed into, in this case, 39 pages. Like this is such a great example of like the compression doing a fine job with it, but for what it is, but you can just see how like if there was breathing room for the story, there's so much to fucking explore. There's so much to dig into.
Yeah. I will say I love a one shot. I love a self-contained story. I love an annual. I love just like jumping into the world and a writer having a story to tell and them telling exactly that story and not expanding it further and just sticking to that. And what I love about that is because that fosters so much community of us having this discussion being like, okay, but what if they did this? Like, what could be the implications if this had been different? And the conversations around that is one of the things I value most about consuming stories in my life. And so like, I love that this exists exactly as it does, but also like, now I have so many more ideas of how it could have gone because
Right?
we've spent so much time talking about how awesome this world is and I want to see more from it.
This has been the problem with a bunch of these where it's just like, wow, that was a
Yeah.
lot of story in just 40 pages. And I like these worlds that they present. Like these are really cool fucking settings, like all these Legend of Dead Earth stories. But this one is the one that I keep coming back to in my head being like, there's so much space that they could have, just like delved into. And because like this being like, I know I'm making a lot of allusions, but like referencing like the first season of Invincible, where we know like the first episode they establish what the big twist of the story is, and then we spend most of the season just living in a world where we're aware of the twist and that suspense.
Mhm.
You know, like, can you imagine, like, open the story and like establish that Superman's starting to go crazy and spend several issues or several episodes with them starting to come to that conclusion and having to like face the idea that like the society that is built around Superman might have, you know, have to give up on like their entire faith structure.
Have you read
Or
any
however you
of
would describe it.
the Justice League Red going on right now?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I feel like I don't know if I'm super up to date, but I feel like that's following a similar idea with what they're doing with Red Tornado and that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I will have to check that out.
I don't know if it's good per se, but it's interesting. I'm still following it.
Okay. Yeah, I unfortunately had to put away my box at my comic shop when I did some hard math on my finances and was like, with baby number 2 coming, it's like I can't keep doing this. I need to not.
I will say it's not something I think you would invest in getting physically. I have a digital subscription, and that's how I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. I want to note that it's still Heat that is the spokesperson for this team, a person who has, as far as we can tell, not slept this entire story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at a certain point of chronic sleep deprivation, you just hit semi-functional and pray.
Yeah. Oh, it's like this one tech week I had when I was working in theater where I was so burned out because I was doing video work for them, but I was also the assistant stage manager for the actual show. And so like as soon as like rehearsal ended, I was just like rendering video like all night. And I got to a point where I was like, oh, I don't need sleep anymore. I just have coffee. And like I had like regular like injections of coffee. And if I didn't have those, I would like crash. But like it was like a solid like 4 days where I just like straight up didn't sleep.
Interesting.
I had one term in college where I had somewhere to be from 4:30 a.m. to 8 p.m. an entire term.
That'll do it. That'll drive you crazy.
Yeah. I really pared back down after that one. But like once you reach that point of I am so locked in, I am the most productive I have ever been in my life. I am just going. I'm living on caffeine and junk food and it's fine. I think that's where Heat's at.
Yeah. One thing I do want to call out though is that Heat is a black man, and I really enjoy that this is a fairly like ethnically diverse, like Heat and Pounder are the two are like two very front and center characters. Mm-hmm. And it's nice having like the lead guy be like a dude, you know, like that just doesn't look very much like Superman. Like I think that's really good.
Yeah, I also when we're looking at the panel of the original team, I did have some questions on, you know, how we often represent black men as the like strong and vulnerable types. And so to have most of the story following a black man that does not have sort of like a invulnerable, invincible type power, I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. He's particularly, he's burning up inside.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With no sleep.
But yeah, so that's the League of Supermen. It's so fucking tight. If anyone wants to see this decompressed, again, the comic I would reference before is Dynamo 5. I like the comic, but it is not perfect. Like it also is a bigger idea than I think that the story is able to capture. But it's such a fucking good hook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like each individual powers of Superman on a team, like that's so fucking cool.
Yeah, it always reminds me, like you said, the kid from Legion of Superheroes, and that's all I always think of when I think of this trope.
But that's also really cool and underexplored, I think. And I like the idea of the Superman going mad being, or rather, the Superman understanding that there was the potential for him to go mad and like choosing to end it beforehand. Like that's a very Supermanly kind of thing to do.
Yeah.
You know,
it was really interesting for the 90s to explore the whole idea of death with dignity.
That's yes. Way. It's a very Kevorkian kind of thing right there.
Yeah. But, if they could do it with anybody, it's Superman, I guess.
Yeah, but again, like that's the League of Supermen, which I think is just a very interesting entry in this whole franchise. Jmike, now that we are several deep, how is this one stacking up in your rankings?
I mean, it was good, but it's not as good as, was it the Man of Steel one, where they find him on the
Space one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one was still my tops, and then Supergirl's right underneath that one, just because of how unique it was.
Mm-hmm.
This one's kind of like mid-tier, right underneath Superboy. But
yeah, I think this and the Superboy ones are both like really strong pitches.
Yeah.
Strong concept, but not as much execution.
Superboy is fine, but like it's also like a lot of story in one issue.
I mean, it had some really cool designs though for some of their outfits, that world building. But yeah, this was, I think it was the Man of Steel one, right?
Yeah, it was the Kurt Busiek one.
That one's my favorite.
Busiek. I don't know how to pronounce it, and like Jay like listened to me, and I was like, I still don't know. But yeah, all right. Like, we still got one more of the actual Superman family issues to talk about, so I'm looking forward to that one. But it's the Bizarro issue, so we'll see how that response is. Sly, what are your responses to all this? Like, I mean, we've talked about the issue, but like the premise and so forth. Like, would you want to check out the other issues in the Superman family of the Legends of Dead Earth? Like, yeah, what are your general thoughts?
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really cool concept. I would love to see more of these issues. Knowing where I'm at in my life, I probably won't, and I'll just listen to you lovely folks talk about them instead. But I thought this is a really cool concept, and I love that you're going back and exploring this as a series and really examining these annuals as interesting pieces of a storytelling medium. I think it was really fun. I had a great time. I'm going to be thinking about this story for a while and all of its implications. So, yeah, I'm really excited to hear what y'all think about the other ones.
Awesome. Well, so I feel like that's I feel like we've talked as much as we can about this issue, because like it's a very dense story, like in terms of, or very brisk story. Like I mean, the they get back from a mission immediately. Here's the rookies. Oh, rookies, we're going out to another mission. We're like, there's no downtime aside from the scene where they're like hanging out, which is when someone goes and immediately hacks into the systems, and then they continue moving on. Like, this is the Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark of comics, in terms of just like, we're gonna just have action beat.
Yeah, we're not getting a beach episode.
No, absolutely not.
We're not sleeping.
We're not sleeping at all.
But man, it's a really fun story. I highly encourage people to check it out if they have the means to. It's not available on the DC app, so us talking about all these is sort of its own funky thing. But still, like it's really cool. I think that the ideas are really cool. It's very brisk, but that's a strength as well, because if anyone wants to check it out, like, they can check it out and be caught up in 20 minutes, and you're good on that side.
Yeah, the accessibility of it's setting up exactly where we are in the world, setting up like what it means to be Superman and what their point of reference is for their reverence of this character, and then immediately jumping in with a fresh team that nobody knows previously, and you really have to learn these characters as you go along. It creates such an easy read. Just, you can pick this up, you can read it in one sitting and move on with your life. I said this down, I think 2 or 3 times, just because there was so much that I was thinking about in terms of the implications of what it means to exist in this world, and I wanted to sit with it a little bit more, which, I had the opportunity to do. But like, you can just, it's a quick read, it's not going to take you very long, and so just getting through it and experiencing the story, it was really fun.
Yeah, art's a little inconsistent, like especially when like there's like certain like throwaway panels with some people. You're like, what is that hairline right there, or shit like that. But
I feel like that every time I read an annual. Like, there's always some little inconsistencies here and there. Like, what's the too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing.
yeah, but that said, it's a fun book, and I think people should check it out and have a good time with it. I would agree with Jmike's sort of assessment that this is more in the middle tier in terms of like the actual effectiveness of the story, but it's a really good hook. It's a fun story. It's a quick story, but the ideas are really cool, and just like will sit with you for a little while, just because the idea of just outfitting people with individual powers is cool, and a Superman that's going crazy is cool, and a society built with Superman as their savior is cool. Like, we don't see very much of the world outside of the League of Supermen. Like it's very much from their perspective.
Yeah, you have no idea what a civilian in this world feels like.
The most we get is the rookies,
Yeah.
like that's,
Yeah. And they've already, partially committed themselves.
they have
to
drank the
this
Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
They're like, give me them superpowers. You got anyone? You got anyone with superpowers?
Exactly.
And it's also cool just to be like, here's the downsides of some of those powers. Like,
Mhm.
invulnerability is one that we always like can think about, because it's such an easy one in our head to go to, where it's just like, oh, I guess you couldn't feel anything. But like all the other powers, like flight, like who would ever think about that being like, oh, I guess you could just like fly away if you weren't paying attention.
Yeah.
And for a medium that so often has a history of completely ignoring or refusing to interact with or writing out any sort of hint of disability.
Yeah.
It's nice to see characters actually have to deal with the ramifications of their powers.
Yeah, for real, like especially See-Through Shield and Pounder, who are all treated as invalids when they're not
Yeah.
in use. Like that's a really cool thing to talk about. Like again, these ideas are really big and really exciting ones to see on print. So Sly, thank you for coming on and chatting with us about this one. I'm really, frankly, because I know you have hearing issues. Like I know this is like a really like the disability aspect must speak out to you in certain ways, and like I'm really glad to have you for this one.
Yeah, no, I was really excited to join. There was so much in here. I was really surprised to see, based on when this was written and the culture of comics at the time, there was a lot of nuggets of really interesting story in this. And so, I always love seeing disability representation. It's something that in the comic space specifically, we see so little of. And when we do, like completely ignored. Like, have we ever talked about what it means for Cyborg to have a limb difference? No, he's just cool and super badass and shit. To really get to dive into that in this story and all of the world has been really fun. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we were able to make this one happen. So yeah, thank you for coming on. Where can people find you and follow you?
That's a great question. I have no idea when this is coming out, but you can pop over to youtube.com/@point in progress and follow along there. And hopefully there will be things up by the time you're hearing this. We got lots of things in the works, not a lot of things actively being posted. So, we're in a kind of transitional planning phase right now, which is tough when I'm out here doing all these cool things advertising us. But I promise there's lots of cool things in the pipeline, and I'm really excited for them to get their time in the light.
Awesome. Yeah, everyone should check that out. Like I said, I've been on, and Jmike, you should you and Sly should chat off mic and
Yeah,
see if there's
sure.
anything you can do. Twisting Jmike's arm and also forcing crossovers. But yeah, again, thank you for coming on, and it was just wonderful chatting with you. So I hope people check out Point in Progress, and yeah, like that would be awesome because you're cool. Jmike, where can people find you and follow you?
Gosh, the pressure. Well, you can mostly find me on Discord, over on the CPOV Discord. You should totally come in and chat with us.
Oh,
whenever
I'm
you
there
feel like
too.
it.
Say hi to me.
Yeah, we're all on the CPOV Discord.
And if you just so happen to be over on Blue Sky, you can find me over J5-Bluesky.social. I'm kind of there. I'm trying to get better at this thing called social media, which I've been on for since it got invented. I'm not great, but I'm trying. But mostly over on Discord. That's where I'm usually perusing and hiding in the shadows.
Since it got invented.
Yeah, I've been on everything, and I've never been good at anything.
2026.
I haven't been good at it, Case.
Social media. I joined Facebook in 2004.
Same. When it was invite only. Yeah.
Right. So social media has been around for 22 years.
Yeah. It hurts,
You're just wrapping your head around it.
It hurts.
Yeah, I got on Twitter in 2011, and we don't want to talk about how old I was. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Well, as the old man on the call, everything makes me feel old.
Like MySpace.
MySpace.
And AIM.
AIM we talk about every episode because for those of you who want to find and follow me, you can find me on the Certain POV Discord, which we are all a part of. It is a great time. You can find a link in our show notes or on our website, certainpov.com. It is a great time. Again, come interact with us. If Discord is not your vibe, I totally understand. You can find me on most social media platforms at Case Aiken, except for Instagram, where you can find me at Quetzalcoatl5, because I am holding on to my AIM screen name from high school because I was pretentious as fuck then, and I'm not giving it up. And that was Quetzalcoatl5, Quetzalcoatl5. So you can find me there. It's a great old time. You can find us all over the interwebs, especially at certainpov.com or on our YouTube channel, which is the Certain POV Media YouTube account. So if you go to youtube.com/certainpovmedia, you can find us. You can also find us at Patreon, where there are tons of awesome people who are supporting us, and that's really cool. Like, we have been doing this for a long time, and it's nice that we get some support because we really appreciate the people who have been tuning in, and we're trying to put out a good product. So if you want to be like the cool people who joined us at the executive producer tier, you can get a shout out at every episode. And even if you don't like the free tier, we do essays every single week related to nerdy topics that you can check out. But the executive producer tier is where it's at, because those people get shout outs at the end of every episode. And that includes Micah McCaw, Carter Hout, Sean Muir, Lee Greger, Memento Young, Logan Crowley, Joe Mastropiero, Casey and Nancy Aiken, Adam Samter, and Keith Lettinen. Those are the awesome people who are part of the executive producer tier for our Patreon. If you want to be like them, we'd highly appreciate it. Again, I just had my second child. I'm just going to throw that one out there. Like it's hard to keep doing this. I'm going crazy right now, but would very much appreciate people joining in. Even at the free tier, we'd very much appreciate it, just because we're trying to put out cool stuff. And the Patreon is honestly where we're testing out most of the ideas that we have before they make it into the podcast proper. So that is a cool place to check out. Again, patreon.com/certainpovmedia is where you can find the Patreon. It is a great time. I really love it. I love doing the weekly essays, both on nerdy topics and on D&D topics. It's a really cool time. It's cathartic for me. So I hope you check that out. Otherwise, you should check out certainpov.com, where we have tons of great shows that are coming out on the regular. We have plugged Legion of Superheroes a lot recently. So while I will mention Long Lived Legion, I'm going to plug the main thing that we've been really pushing recently, which is Trade School, which is our new program that we've been doing, where guests come on and talk for 5 to 15 minutes about a comic book trade paperback that they love. If you have a comic book that you really care about and want to talk about why you love it, please let me know, because we are taking submissions for this. And if you are just looking for reading suggestions, check out this podcast. The podcast is literally people talking about the comics that mean the most to them, that are collected in some way that you're able to find them. So check out Trade School. It's available on the YouTube channel or on its own RSS feed. It is a really great collection of people talking about their passion for comics. And each episode is just a wonderful example of this comic meant something to a person, and you should consider taking a look at it.
And hopefully I will get around to recording the episodes for the stack of comics I have sitting waiting for me to talk about.
Yes, hopefully Sly will be on maybe even before this episode drops. But at the moment, Sly has not given me an episode yet. But anyone is welcome to give an episode. Just reach out to me. You can DM me on Discord or any of the other social media platforms, or you can email me at case.aiken@gmail.com, because I know how email addresses work. And no one has doubled up yet. Like Watchmen is spoken for. Everything else is fair game. Go for it. Let me know. But yeah, whatever comic you want to talk about, I'd love to hear about why you're passionate about it. So that's Trade School. You should check it out. It has been going strong. We've had some really cool guests. Recently, we just had Paul Kaminsky, who is the Superman editor for DC Comics, do an episode on 0 Hour. So that's a really cool one. But yeah, we're trying to get all kinds of people just talking about it. And it doesn't matter who you are. Like if you're just a person who listened to this episode out of the blue and you've never done a podcast before and has no social media presence, we still want to hear why a comic was important to you. So reach out to me. I would love to hear about it. And yeah, again, 5 to 15 minutes, you might change a person's life by introducing them to a book that really matters to them. So please reach out. And if you don't want to reach out, you just want a reading suggestion, check out the podcast. It's really cool. Like, everyone is doing a great job of doing really concise explanations of why these comics matter to them. And I think that this is awesome. Like, of course I do. I'm the person producing it, but
I'll say it. It's awesome. I have nothing to do with it yet.
Exactly. Otherwise, you should circle back to our next episode. We have almost finished up the Superman family of the Legends of Dead Earth. Next time we will be talking about the Action Comics issue, which is the Bizarro issue. But until then, I hope you have a great week and stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are Jmike Recaps and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Sophia Ricciardi. Our logo is by Chris Batista, and episode art is by Case Aiken. Our theme is by Gen Moonen.
Digging for Kryptonite is a weekly podcast series hosted by yours truly, Anthony Desiato, examining Superman's vast mythology across time and media. If you have a favorite story, creator, or adaptation, chances are we've covered it over the past 200-plus episodes. I've interviewed creators including Mark Waid, Dan Jurgens, Jeff Loeb, Joe Kelly, and many more. Whether you're a lifelong Superman fan like me, or you're new to the character, we have you covered. Subscribe to Digging for Kryptonite wherever you get podcasts, and remember, it's about what you do. It's about action.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.